Okay, well, hello everybody, and welcome to our webinar today. So for this one, it is the fourth and final one of our series of the digital transformation journey, and we are calling this one Key Facets of a Digital Transformation Enterprise. So I'll get into a little bit more about what that is in a bit and what exactly we're going to be going over today. Just if anybody does have any questions on the side, make sure to put them in the Q&A section, and if we can get to them throughout, we will. Otherwise, we'll have a question and answer session at the end. But the next thing that I wanted to do is quickly just kind of remind us about why we are here and exactly who Macedon is and why it makes sense for us to be kind of giving this. So we are a team of experts in digital transformation and intelligent automation that have done 600 plus engagements over 100 clients. And that has really given us a lot of breadth of the different types of projects and the different types of scenarios that you're entering into. And so from everything that we have learned over the 10 years that we have been, doing this, we wanted to have a really sort of end-to-end look at how you go through that digital transformation process from, the initial discovery all the way through to a final long-term enterprise. And so let's go in and just kind of do a quick introduction of ourselves. So my name is Colin Schoenfelder. I'm the Director of Technology at Macedon. And so I oversee our Center of Excellence internally. And so all of the resources that do the types of things that we're going to talk about in a little bit. And also our internal asset development. And joined with me is Stacey, right? If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Absolutely. So I am the Director of Delivery and Education here at Macedon Technologies. I've been working with Appian and other intelligent automation systems for going on 20 years now, been quite a while, and have helped many of my clients through the digital transformation journey up through governance.
Great. Okay. And so now, just as a kind of a reminder about exactly where we came from here. So when we're originally talking about the digital transformation journey, we realized that it sort of has four parts, and we were thinking about trying to do all of those into one webinar, but realized that there was just too much content there. So we broke it up into four different pieces. We went through and did the preparation where really we were talking about sort of that initial, just getting ready to start that journey, just sort of starting to understand exactly what was going to be involved and what the big goals were that we were trying to get out of the digital transformation path. The next one that we did was a panel discussion, which was really talking about the different facets of change management, implementation, and using accelerators. So that first project, so making sure that we were able to get through there. And then Stacey did another one on the program, if you wouldn't mind talking about that a little bit.
Oh yeah, it's one of my favorite topics is once you've got multiple projects out there, multiple streams, how can you make sure that your program sustains? So I met with a couple of our portfolio managers and we had a great conversation talking about sustainability, what the role and responsibility is, as well as how to make sure that your own team can grow into the experts that they need to be in order to make sure that this program is stable. Yeah.
Right. And so in this presentation, the fourth one, it's really talking about enterprise. So how can you take, you've got a couple of projects under your belt, maybe you only have like one and you're really looking to scale up because you've had a lot of buy-in and you're looking to take that next step. How can you take that and make it so that it's a very long-term sustainable project that is going to last you, for years of, continuing to grow out your digital transformation across your entire enterprise? So that's what we're talking about in this one. And it's really broken up into two different parts. And we're going to kind of break this up and go into two different pieces separately. But we're talking about, from the governance perspective, and then also from the center of excellence. So starting with the center of excellence, kind of the part that I'm going to talk about a little bit, it's really about that sort of technical side of things. So, like what are we going to do to make sure that this is sustainable over a long term from a technical perspective? And then the other part of it is the governance side. So if you want to do like just a quick.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the governance part, I think, is the biggest mystery. Out of everything we have here, I'd say it's the biggest black box for most of the clients that I've worked with, right? They all know they need governance, but who it consists of that governance committee, right? What do they do exactly? Is this just additional overhead? Why do we have this, right? What level of effort is required for any individual who is part of a governance committee and who helps establish the governance. What is the expectations for them, right? And what type of people should be in that role? So there's been a lot of like nuts and bolts kind of questions when it comes to governance, and I'm hoping to resolve some of that in this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, the Center of Excellence is somebody that, or is a group that sort of works in parallel to that governance and is really a big part of that. And so I think that it makes sense to sort of start with talking a little bit about the Center of Excellence first, just to kind of get a baseline and exactly what's going on there.
Yeah,
And so,
I would actually say that the Center of Excellence sometimes is implemented before governance, right? It comes in much earlier in my experience. But Colin, obviously, this is your wheelhouse. This is what you do, right? You run a group of architects. So can you tell a little bit about what a COE is responsible for?
Sure. So at its high level, the Center of Excellence is really a group of technical resources. And it's really about trying to make sure and maintain that technical oversight as you are scaling that up, or your program and your enterprise up. And that, when I say technical, or the ability to scale rather, I'm really talking about a couple of different things. You know, when you think about scaling, you know, it's in technical, you know, platforms, it's obvious to think about, you know, performance, right? As I have this, which is going to be something which is going to grow over the course of, you know, n number of years, I want to make sure that as I'm adding data and as I'm adding different workflows and as I'm adding different projects and tons of different users, that this is going to be able to scale performance-wise with that. And for sure, that is, you know, a big consideration and something that the Center of Excellence is maintaining. But the other thing about it is just kind of going back to those original slides, right? When we're talking about the preparation in the project, the real goal of digital transformation at this stage in 2021, right, is that we've already gone through, in many cases, you know, that process of going from all these paper processes, you know, and trying to digitize them. And over the course of the last 20 years or so, even a little bit longer that in many cases, we have done that, but we have gotten ourselves into a situation where we have all of these different, you know, silos of technology. Different parts of our business are all being run in different systems that aren't communicating with each other. And you're ending up with all these different swivel chair, you know, technologies that you're trying to deal with. And really what the Center of Excellence is trying to do at a higher level than just, you know, sort of the performance of the system is ensuring that you're not recreating those silos, right? That I have my centralized platform, and when I'm going from project to project and I'm creating these additional applications and bringing them into my platform, that I'm not just creating a bunch of new silos of information that aren't effectively sharing resources, that aren't effectively sharing all of these different outcomes. So really, the COE is responsible at a high level for all of, you know, that sort of maintenance, for that kind of guidance. And the way that they sort of do that, and the other things that they're responsible for at a more tactical level in order to do that, is like really just being a general technical escalation point. You know, we're really talking about, if I have a bunch of different project teams that are all working together, making sure that people are going to have someplace that they can go in order to ask, you know, high-level questions about what the platform is going to do, and best ways to approach things. They're also getting involved at the beginning of projects, right? Just maybe after they've been identified, to make sure that there is opportunity for reuse when it exists. So making sure that they're taking advantage of, if I've already created, you know, an integration with this one particular system, that they are going to be able to have, that they're going to be able to reuse that integration when they're kind of starting on their new project. Or if they are going to be integrating with a new system, trying to make sure that that integration is something which is cataloged effectively so that other projects are able to take advantage of it when they want to do so. And then finally, it's really about trying to, you know, make sure that they are a lot of enablement that is going to be happening to the project teams. When you have a new project starting and you have new development teams, they are going to, you know, come into a system that might have already been in development for a long period of time, and there can be a big ramp up on how to do that. So making sure that you're doing enablement for those individual project teams so that they can effectively develop within that code environment.
Yeah, that seems really important. All of those things are incredibly powerful as you grow your program. What kind of artifacts do they own?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of expanding on that description of the different things that are going to be shared resources, I think that that is a really good metric for the kinds of things that an architect or COE is going to own. The COE is going to own any technical artifact that is going to be used across multiple different project streams. So the kind of obvious high level ones are things like integration catalogs that I mentioned before. So if we have integrated with 5 or 6 different systems, the COE is going to be that group that knows, here are those different systems, here's the kind of data that they are expecting and the data that they are going to output. Here's our standard means of integrating, because I might have a bunch of different methods of integrating with these various systems depending on where they're coming from. So here's the approach that we used to do that integration. And then kind of similarly about the different data points that we have. So often at any organization, there is going to be a few very important key pieces of data, those key business objects that everybody is sort of working around. Those shared data points are also something that the Center of Excellence would maintain ownership of. So if a project team needs to, interact with that in a new way, there's, a new view that they need, or there's a new, piece of information that they would like to associate it with, the COE is the one that would kind of be responsible for implementing those updates in order to accommodate it and making sure that those updates are not going to negatively impact all of the other project streams that are using that centralized piece of information. So different kind of shared resources like that are something that the Center of Excellence absolutely owns. But then it kind of gets into making sure that from a standardization perspective, that there is one central location for that. And that can be things like the standardization around security, right? What is our approach to security across our entire application? In some cases, depending on just sort of the maturity of the technical organization of the particular organization, they might have dedicated security teams which are really implementing standards across all of the different platforms that exist in an organization. And in that case, it would be the responsibility of the Center of Excellence to implement and make sure that those standards are maintained in all of the different applications that are within their sort of digital transformation process. But if that is absent, really just defining those standards and using their expertise in order to make sure that that's going to scale as things move along. But then also the standardization in terms of the best practices that there exist with the platforms and the technologies that they are using. More generally, here are the different strategies that we have in order to make sure that this is going to be performant as we scale. But then also the standards that they have at the individual organization, because a lot of different centralized UIs that are reused across the entire organization, different centralized and common use cases and patterns that are defined for that particular organization if they have things that they're reusing all the time. Those are the sorts of things that the Center of Excellence are going to own with regard to artifacts. And then at the sort of platform level, any sort of customizations that are going to exist in a platform, for sure, those are going to be things the Center of Excellence is going to maintain and own. Any DevOps practices. So how are we going to to get our code from development through test? Any performance testing environments that might exist, then finally up to production. So making sure that those sort of pipelines and those DevOps practices are effective. And then finally, all of the different platform and product questions or support. Those are things that the Center of Excellence can own. So if we suspect that the platform has a defect that we've discovered, the COE would be the ones who would be going in to try and investigate that. Or any product enhancements and requests that are coming down the line, the COE are the ones who are responsible for overseeing those platform changes and making sure that they are implemented correctly. So definitely a lot of things that the COE owns.
Yeah, you just went through a huge list, but let me give an example of something I've seen out there in the field that I think might help draw and make a little more sense for someone who's hearing this laundry list and is like, what? They do so much, right? So I had this client one time that had a SharePoint integration that 2 or 3 different teams used. Totally made sense that they all used this. It was a great use of SharePoint, great use of the technology that we were using. Well, they upgraded SharePoint, as you do, And the integration broke. None of the teams currently in development wanted to take on the cost and burden of updating that SharePoint plugin. And the sustainability stream really didn't have the expertise for it in that particular case. So this fell on the COE, because the COE actually owns this cross process type component, and the COE has the expertise to make those changes. You know, they own this. Colin, would you say that's a good representative example?
Yeah, exactly. It's important to have, a team that is sort of operating a little bit outside of, the main project groups in order to sort of do that cross-project, implementations. And really, it just relieves the burden from all of those individual projects. Because like you mentioned, it's like nobody who is going to have the budget to do, that sort of an activity to upgrade this, integration. It shouldn't be burdened onto each of the individual project teams because it's something which is used more broadly. So yeah, that's absolutely a great use case for having a COE.
So with all these responsibilities and all this expertise here, how do you staff them? Who actually belongs in a center of excellence?
Yeah, so absolutely, that can be something which is a little bit difficult to find. First of all, one of the things that is extremely important is that they need to be experts in the low-code platform that you're using. And for sure, they're going to have a lot of experience and seeing these different technologies over the course of the time that they are going to have been, working in that field. But the low-code platform is the central hub where all of these different pieces come together. And so it's very important that they have good context on how to integrate all of these different systems effectively. So that's kind of like the first baseline. But then sort of also, it's very important that just from a functional perspective, not even just from a technology perspective, but from a functional perspective, that they are a group of people who have implemented a wide and diverse set of applications and different use cases and been in different business areas. Because when you've seen an application which is something which maybe is a pure backend one, like we are just doing orchestration of a bunch of web services that are coming in and manipulating the data and not really doing a whole lot of user interaction, right? That is a very different architectural challenge than it is if I have something where maybe I only have 10 of these business instances or these workflow instances a year, but they last 3 years in order to complete, and they're very technically involved, and over the course of that time have a ton of different things that they are integrating with and all of that. Those are two very different problems, and so it's important if you're going to be able to make intelligent recommendations when these different new project use cases are coming into the fold of your enterprise, that they are able to speak in an educated way about those and give educated recommendations about how to approach those projects. And then finally, sort of involved with that, right, is that because they will have been around for a long time and their experiences in that digital transformation space, right? The whole thing about that is being able to integrate effectively, right? Integrations with other different systems. They have an understanding of the best place to warehouse data and how to effectively do that, how to integrate with all of these different systems and make it feel seamless, right? To an end user, it shouldn't feel like I have these separate, disparate systems that I'm integrating with. And an architect or a COE representative who has a good understanding of how to approach that is really key when we're trying to figure out how to approach these different problems and remove those silos and get us down into one complete platform.
So is this like a full-time position? Is this part-time? How would, as far as staffing allocation, what would you say?
Yeah, so I think that it can vary a little bit. When you're first trying to find the resources, often it is something that can be grown out of your initial project, right? Like if you have a part-time architect role who is working on the first project, and then you start to spin up a number of different project streams, it might make sense for that to continue to be a part-time role, right? You have a part-time architect who is, or just COE representative who is there to assist any of the different project streams as they come along, able to maintain some of the documentation and really try and streamline the different things that are coming through. But as you start to scale and there starts to be a lot of different projects that are all occurring simultaneously, that there are a lot of different teams that need to be, integrated with, it can definitely make sense for that to grow into something which is a full-time, resource. But it can definitely vary depending on just, how many different project streams that we have going at any given time.
Yeah. So you've talked about how they can help projects out with, giving best practices, giving, updating mutual components, that kind of thing. Outside of project work, you mentioned a little bit about platform updates and platform maintenance. What other kind of activities happen sort of outside of the project work that these people work on?
Yeah, absolutely. So just by nature of the fact that these folks are experts in the platform that they are in, and they're going to be involved in the community, right, of that platform, very engaged with the larger culture around that, they should start to have some expertise on seeing and knowing the different things that are going to be coming down the line, starting to create different best practices for features that are in releases that are coming up, even starting to have relationships to form and influence the different features that are coming down the line for the different products that are being used throughout your enterprise. And so it's really starting to be very proactive about the things that are coming down the line, and then trying to use that for the different project streams. Like, we know that this is going to be a new feature, or it just got released as part of this new or one of the new features. We haven't done the upgrade to our environment yet in order to support it. So in that meantime, I'm going to develop out some best practices and make sure that the project teams are aware that these things are coming down the line so that they can take advantage of them as soon as they have access to them. So that's the kind of a thing that they're going to be doing outside, like really maintaining expertise and developing the expertise on that project and making sure that things are coming down the line in an effective manner. But the other thing is that, like you alluded to a little bit earlier, when it comes to the governance committee, the COE is really something that is going to be working as part of that larger team. And so, that was sort of another thing that they need to be doing outside of just sort of the technical, center of excellence for the individual projects, is interacting with, sort of the larger, teams of governance that are going to be going on. And so with that, I'd love to toss it over to you so you can talk a little bit about what that team looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. We talked about how COE often comes first because it seems like a more obvious tactical need early on, perhaps even when you're in the program stage, earlier program stage, right? So you have, and I've seen this many times, you've got a team, they've got projects that are in prod, we've actively helping teams perform their jobs better using intelligent automation. We've got other digital transformation initiatives in the pipeline. We've got projects ongoing, right? We've got a sustainability stream. So, we've already gone through that, but they help to not just maintain the systems that are currently out there in prod, but also evolve them, right? So you've already got a sustainability stream, you get the COE, and the COE can help to make sure that there is alignment across whatever the platform may be and across the technologies about this. And everyone tends to think they're hunky-dory at first, right? They're doing pretty good. Is that your experience? What do you think? Do you think they're doing well, Colin?
For sure, on day one, everybody thinks that they are, doing very well. But fast forward a couple of months into that launch, and things really start to lose a lot of perspective, and it can be really difficult to continue that path and continue to take advantage of it. So I don't think that they're in as good a spot as they might think they are up front.
And it's funny, it's nothing to do with technology. It's because we're all human in the end, right? So you've got all of these stakeholders, and the pool of stakeholders keeps growing. And you're still, dependent on the technology, which the COE is managing, but, there's going to be confrontation where some people want something updated and someone else doesn't, So communication, I think, is the key.
Right. And so the governance committee, they're facilitating that communication, or exactly like how are they helping out with that part of it?
I would say the core way the governance committee is helping with communication. I mean, aside from the communication hub that I have listed here on the slide, is actually staffing. So the staffing of a governance committee includes representatives from the COE, from the sustainability stream that I was just talking about. You've got your product owners for ongoing work, development work that's going on, the process owners, the people who own the applications and processes that are in prod, right? You've got a representative from your PMO often there as well. And then there's this final person that I'm very firmly believe should be in each and every governance committee, which is an evangelist type person. So that person can be the sponsor, they might not be the sponsor. It's just someone who's very enthusiastic about what's going on, the digital transformation initiative. They help create excitement from other divisions, other business units. They help discover those new processes to bring them to the table, right? So they spread awareness of the good things that the initiative is doing. And so they tend to be charismatic. They tend to be very enthusiastic about all of this. And they represent on the committee the people who have not yet joined the initiative, the people that are waiting in the wings, that are working on their business use case or whatever to join. And they have some opinions as well, but obviously, their vote may not weigh quite as strongly as the people who are currently using whatever the technology is. So by getting all of these people in the room, you can make an informed decision across the full team that benefits everyone on the team.
Right. And it's definitely important, I think, to note that as you continue moving forward with, the digital transformation journey throughout your enterprise, you get more and more and more, value out of it, right? As you kind of bring those things in. So that, evangelist job, I think, is something that's really important for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then, so I'm curious, because very much like, with the COE, right? Like, this is something that has a lot of responsibilities to it. Is this the sort of a thing where it's a full-time job, or is this something which is another like part-time role? And how often does this group meet? Like, how much is the time commitment?
I can hear some of our audience members probably groaning in their heads, like, oh my goodness, that's so many people. How often do they have to be together, right? It really is highly dependent on your organization and your needs. I would say the vast majority of the ones that I've helped set up have been meeting either quarterly or monthly, depending on how well established the initiative is. So if it's a fairly new, like you've just reached the enterprise level, you might have a few more to begin with. Or if there is a big event coming up, some major shift and some new technology getting added, or some major upgrade, right? You might have a few additional at a time, but usually quarterly is good enough for those kinds of discussions, if that makes any sense.
Right, exactly. And then I guess, as part of that, when they're making all of these discussions and having all of those different, decisions that you're making, can you talk a little bit more about just sort of what the actual, decisions that they're making are, and exactly sort of what they're driving forward?
Yeah, I think the best way to describe this, and that goes under the program decisions here on my slide here, but I think the best way is through a story. I'm big on storytelling. So I had this one client, and they had this system, this platform that everyone is working on, right? And there's this big upgrade coming with a lot of great features, and COE is excited about it. We've got at least one product owner who is really looking forward to using those new features. In fact, they don't even want to go live until they can incorporate those features, right? Because it's something that their business stakeholders are very interested in. Meanwhile, highly regulated environment, keep in mind, because that changes things a little bit. Another product owner who is an ongoing development stream is about to go live and does not want to make any changes to the system, including an upgrade, nothing, because doesn't want it to disrupt their go live, right? So they don't want to have to do that regression testing right now. They don't have that in their project plan. They really don't want to rock the boat at this time because they're about to go live and they've already shown the system to all of the stakeholders who are going to be using it. So we had that debate, we had the meeting, COE did their presentation about why this upgrade would be really useful and the benefits of the different parts of the upgrade that we'd be able to see. And there were people pro, there were people con, we had a great discussion. And at the end of the day, we decided to do the upgrade, but delayed it a little bit so that the one go live could happen and the second go live could still reap the benefits of it. And COE also figured out a way where we could upgrade one of the servers so that the team that is currently in progress that really wants to take advantage of those new features could go ahead and not have their development be delayed.
Right.
So, you know, we were able to come to that compromise because we were able to come together as a team and have that kind of mediation, hashing out of these things. It, you know, I gotta say though, there was also a little bit of awareness there too. Some of the people in the room didn't even know that the upgrade was on the table until we had that meeting. And I think you'll find that if you don't have a governance structure in place, that there can be major communication mishaps and there can be whole segments of the community that aren't getting the information they need. They don't know about, you know, hey, we've got this new technology now, here's how you use it. Oh, that can replace something that you're doing that's even more expensive or cumbersome in some way, right? Or, oh, we've got this upgrade coming down the line. You need to be prepared to do the regression testing, right? So this really helps that the whole governance committee can make that decision. And sometimes it's rubber stamped, oh yes, this is great, but then everyone has the awareness because we talked about it, right? So I would say in general, the core aspect, one of the most critical aspects of governance is mediating and resolving conflicts. Beyond that, they're able to do that, I guess I should say, because they're aware of the pros and cons. You got all the right people in the room to describe the pros and cons of the decisions so that they can make that decision across the business units who would be impacted. And they also know enough about the vision. So I have had other examples where the vision was very concrete about what needed to be done when. And so there were decisions that, though it was painful to one group, went along with the vision of the overall business initiative and said, hey, we need to force this upgrade, even though you don't want to do the regression testing, we'll figure something out there, you know, changing budgetary concerns or something like that, so that we can still achieve the overall vision for the initiative. I think that what you run into oftentimes is if you don't have the governance committee sort of forcing that vision in, it ends up, you know, you mentioned silos, but it's like little fiefdoms, right? As you got different people making decisions different ways, and maybe you had a vision to begin with, but then if there's no one to help bring you back into that centralized digital transformation initiative vision, they start making their own, you know, separate ways a little bit. So it's a way to make sure that that happens as well.
Yeah, and you know, that's super important. And you know, even just like looking for opportunities, right? Because if we have already built out, you know, this particular data point on this, you know, for something which enables one of the other projects in order to, you know, have an additional feature that they weren't able to do before because it was, you know, cost prohibitive. You know, that's the sort of opportunity that the governance can absolutely do. So it's really important to have those kinds of conversations.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. It's one of those things where you don't know you need it until you absolutely are critically like, till you've encountered the problem. And you know, it's not that anyone wants to be mean. It's not like anyone's trying to be difficult. It's just just people working together. You eventually have a little bit of, you know, contention every now and then. So it's good to plan for how to handle that early on. And I guess to go along with what you were saying here, it's part of what they also do, and I hinted at it before, is they also have a budget usually.
Okay.
Now, again, each and every governance committee is a little different, but they handle that centralized budget for things such as the COE and perhaps even the sustainability streams. If the sustainability stream is handling projects across the entire organization, you know. And again, that depends very much on your funding and your particular organization. Some organizations, they're totally fine with having that funding at that level. Others really want it at the division or business unit type level. And so it's critical at that point to have a governance committee to have a set of budget for things such as, you know, investing in the new technology or investing in updating shared components, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. And so is there some sort of, when you're trying to set this up, you mentioned that there's a bunch of different, representative staffing and things like that. Is there some sort of like template for that, or how do you exactly figure out exactly what, people are going to represent this and the kinds of things that they're going to be responsible for?
There really isn't. I wish I could say there were. It's many times as I've tried to cook one up, right? There just isn't a template for how a governance committee is going to work. It's going to depend on your organization and what you need. So for instance, I've got some where the governance committee is actually in charge of the communication plans, which is part of change management, where, you've got one person who's working with multiple of these technologies, they're a worker, right? And so they're concentrating on their task. And then we happen to know from the program standpoint that you've got multiple rollouts that will impact that one person. So there could be a joint communication. In other places, the PML takes care of that. So, it really depends on where the gaps are of what you may have. And then also another example, which can go to the governance committee, is if there is a steering committee that wants to know what the ROI is on their investments and wants to know the overall program view of how everything is going at the enterprise level, right? They often own that kind of communications as well. Not every digital transformation initiative has a steering committee.
Yeah.
Again, it depends on your particular organization and its needs.
Gotcha. Great. So is there anything that I missed in there? Or did we talk about all the different things that the governance committee does? I know that it's a very nebulous thing that can have a lot of different things that they're responsible for.
One of the other valuable things that I've seen done and have helped set up is to have governance committee also own a library of business justification. So you can have, if the business unit needs to get separate funding to, kick off their project, which then falls within the domain of this governance committee, for instance, they may need help writing up that business justification and securing the funds, right? So they can go to the governance committee, which includes COE, of course, to help, figure out what has worked before and what they can copy and paste into their own business justification document to sort of speed that up for them, for things that, the type of metrics that people are looking for when they're hoping to do one of these initiatives.
Gotcha. Cool. It is fun, just sort of the shared kind of responsibility, the correlations between kind of the way that COE is approaching sort of the technical side and trying to remove those silos and trying to ensure that we have those sorts of backlogs of information and just shared components that we can use in future projects, and making sure that it's scalable from a perspective that's easy to add on all these other projects. And the governance committee really seems like it's doing that from the project perspective, making sure that it's easy from a higher level, from just making sure that the business is able to continue to add things on and communicate effectively between all the different project teams. So it's kind of fun how those two things are very similar, but just sort of affecting different parts of the business.
Yeah, it's like the people versus the technology side of making sure that you've got these things in place and can prevent silos at every level.
Right. Yeah. And so we've been talking about this, at a fairly high level. Thought it would be helpful to kind of go in and actually do something which is a little bit more, concrete in this is an actual identification of a project. So if we are something that is, coming through, we've had, enterprise going on for a little while, we maybe have a number of different projects that we already are maintaining in the pipeline. And then we're sort of, starting to talk through that governance committee and identifying different projects. Maybe can you talk a little bit about, right at that beginning time, what the governance committee is doing when a new project or a new idea is coming down the pipeline?
Oh, sure. Often that evangelist is the one who helps identify the project. Now, they may not be, maybe the business unit can discover it for themselves, but usually it's with some awareness, and the evangelist is part of the role that does that. Now, I guess I should caveat an earlier answer. Sometimes the evangelist can be a full-time role, even though the governance committee itself, participation in that in particular is not a full-time role. But it's worth noting that for some organizations, depending on the size, the evangelist can be a full-time role of sort of spreading awareness and goodwill, if you will, about the digital transformation initiative. But anyway, so during that identification period, the evangelist, of course, does their job to help identify the potential for improvement. And there's a executive communication, again, to that steering committee if it exists.
Right. And then sort of once the project has been identified, that's sort of where COE starts to get involved, right? Where it's like, okay, well, this is a project. Does it make sense for technology? Sometimes things don't even really need that much technology involved. But often, if we're talking about, these like low code platforms, trying to build out some solution is going to be appropriate. And so figuring out what the different integrations or what the different data points and what the different common objects that can be used as part of this project to accelerate its development is a huge part of what they're doing at the beginning of the project, and just making sure that they are going to be taking advantage of and just adding to the collection of different things that can be standardized across a project. So COE definitely is very interested in that beginning of project. So what is the governance committee sort of starting to do right at the beginning of the implementation?
Yeah, that's actually, it's great because the COE is helping you save money right off the bat, right? You've got those components that you're able to use to jumpstart and speed up any new project. So what the governance committee is doing is usually documenting, here's the anticipated business value that we're going to get out of this, the business value as well as the return on investment. And part of that return on investment type of calculation does take into account how much we save due to what the COE can present and save time and money on. But there is a bit of a calculation there, and oftentimes someone new to a digital transformation initiative isn't fully aware of all of the value that they can get out of one of those projects. So they can also help to make sure that through the library that I mentioned before, help to make sure that you realize all of the value that you are able to get out of the project that you anticipate doing.
Right. And that speaks, I think, also to that breadth of different types of implementations. Sometimes if people like project teams or business stakeholders haven't been familiarized with the digital transformation process, the breadth of the capabilities, I think, is something which is super important to understand. And then sort of once you're kind of getting into the project implementation, right? Like we are, iterating, we are building out this project. I think that the COE probably has the most obvious, responsibility here that they have, which is sort of, doing the review of the architecture, doing code reviews, making sure that it's being implemented in a scalable way, like really kind of in the weeds of the technology there, enforcing the best practices. So for sure, I think that, in the actual execution is probably the most obvious place for the COE, but how about the governance committee? Like what kinds of things would they be doing in this time?
In this slot, I put aids in the conflict resolution between product owners, but in fact, that happens throughout. I would say that is the core of what happens during this time period, though. When you're actively developing, you want to make sure that your project isn't going to be derailed by someone else trying to do something, or that COE isn't going to push something down that might change the way that you had planned your project. So that conflict resolution, that awareness of the communication in general, I think is the core of where governance committee helps with this part of a project.
Gotcha. Once kind of a project is moving to the place where we want to start to roll it out to the end users, I think that really the COE's role in that part of it is kind of just sign off from a technical perspective, making sure that all of the different credentials are, configured correctly for any integrations that we have to do. Just making sure that, all of the different accounts and things like that are all set up, making sure that people are going to be able to log in, and all of those kind of little things that, are important when you're going live with the project. That's sort of like what COE is sort of guiding the project team on. Here's the checklist, make sure that you've gone through all of those things. And then kind of like once you get over into operation, sort of that transition, it's really when you're going over to recommending, for platform upgrades, those things that we were talking about before, making sure that different upgrades that are coming down the line, the features that are going to be available really have impact on the different project teams, making sure that the best practices from, that are learned in an individual project or added from an individual project are able to be incorporated into, the larger set of best practices that any organization is going to have. So there's definitely a lot of things that they're sort of doing in maintenance as these different projects are coming in. How about, kind of from a governance committee side, what are they kind of doing from that closure to operation?
Well, like I mentioned before, there's the library of business justifications to help the next people along. But I think the core aspect of the governance committee at this stage is simply the budget, right? They hold the purse strings for things such as COE, things such as certain sustainability activities, right? And so they can make sure that you've got the budget that you need to accommodate things as your business changes or as the technologies change, like I mentioned with that SharePoint integration, right? You've got changes in your business environment that are going to continue even after a project is over, and the governance helps to make sure that you are going to get the most value out of your application or whatever the technology may be for as long as possible.
Gotcha. Great. And so that really concludes the presentation that we wanted to go over. Very happy with, getting to present and all of the different things that we've learned over the course of the 10 years at Macedon that we've been doing these kinds of implementations. I'd open it up for questions. I'm seeing on this thing that it's asking me to start anew when it says QA, so I'm not sure if I actually opened up the question and answer to go. So I don't see any questions over there right now. So if anybody has any, feel free to reach out to us at any time. And while this is the last presentation that we are doing as part of this series for the digital transformation journey, definitely follow along with us. We already have a couple more planned for the next few months across, kind of a range of topics from, the project side and, the business process, side of things, and then also from the technology. So look forward to that on our YouTube channels and all of our different social media. And thank you all for attending. And thank you, Stacey, for going through this journey with me on, talking about digital transformation. And until next time.
It is always a pleasure, Colin.